My next guest says, forget warnings. It's time to start acting. Republican House Armed Services Committee member Mike Turner. Good morning, sir. Good to see you.
Morning.
Part of the conversation that we were just having is are these efforts by the United States just a little too late at this point? You know, President Biden came in, he was tested by foreign leaders, and they essentially have realized that potentially they've got a green light here when they're dealing with him.
Right. Looking at the situation, one of the fallacies we have to understand is that anything Putin says about Ukraine being a threat to Russia, of course, is false. Ukraine, as you know, gave up nuclear weapons during the fall of the Soviet Union and gave territorial integrity assurances to Russia. Russia, in turn, gave them to Ukraine. They've already violated that in annexing Crimea. So there is no threat from Ukraine to Russia. This is all a trumped-up basis for Russia to amass troops and threaten Ukraine, which they did again last year. What we think the administration needs to do is moving more quickly. You know, they've had notice that Russia had its designs on Ukraine, that this could become a military conflict. They should have been giving lethal weapons to Ukraine so they can defend themselves. Just now, they're talking about moving troops into the NATO countries that are in the area. Putin, one of his demands was that actually NATO withdraw from NATO countries that had entered before 1997, excuse me, after 1997, which means that, of course, the Baltics, Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, all would be at risk. The administration now looking to put troops in those areas. Hopefully, we're going to see that there'll be unintended consequences from Russia's threats, that, in fact, Europe and the United States will bolster their security and will lessen the overall risk.
Do you think, I mean, we're sort of approaching crisis point now, and so we're having these kinds of conversations, but do you think over the course of his conversations with Vladimir Putin that President Biden could have used some diplomacy, could have reassured him that, you know, his worst fears would not come true, and some of the other NATO allies could have done that as well to sort of avoid the situation that we're in altogether?
Well, I think this is, you know, when Putin has started with his statements that Russia should regain its territory that it had in the during the Soviet Union, and post-Soviet Union, it needs to work to, reconnect that territory. It already has stated openly of its intention to threaten its neighbors. It's hard to give assurances to Russia. Remember, Russia always wants assurances to make it easier for them to undertake aggression or threaten their neighbors, which is why they want NATO to withdraw to their 1997 boundaries, so those countries are more vulnerable to Russians' threats, aggressions, and perhaps even invasion.
Some people have questioned the advisors to the president, if you will, looking at what happened in Afghanistan last year, looking at the situation here and the fact that there was a lack of, if you will, foreign policy strategy coming out of this administration. It seems like the crisis just approaches and then everybody becomes frantic trying to find a solution.
Absolutely, and they're too late to the game. I mean, literally, Russia marched their troops last April around Ukraine, and at that time, the administration could have taken this as a signal that they needed to deter Russia, and they needed to make certain that if Russia did invade Ukraine, that it did not occur with very low cost. Otherwise, Russia can be emboldened, and then we have a very serious situation in our hands in Europe, and to threatening both our allies and NATO. The administration appears to be soft and weak as it talks to those who tend to do their neighbors harm or who are aggressors.
Representative Mike Turner, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll talk soon.